Today we want to actually put a bit of a capstone on what we were and have been looking at in the last few weeks. And we want to ask the question, Easter is over. Now what? Does anyone still have any chocolate still hanging around your house? 1, 2, 3. Oh. Wow, half of them. Half of them. How long will it be hanging around your house? Long time. Long time. Okay. I am not a chocolate person. I'm not. I like a bit of Reese's every now and again, but it's not my thing. Not my thing. We're going to be looking at John chapter 21, please, verses 15 through 23. We're going to get Allison up here in just a few minutes to read for us. And I got to say this. We'll have a footstool up here for Allison. That's mean. That's evil to say that. I was going to say it. I'm not going to say it, though. I'm not going to say it.
She's not told me, Chris.
We have put an incredible amount of time and energy into Easter events, recognizing the death, burial, and resurrection. And the post, by the way, remember we said about the post-resurrection appearances. That this thing was not done in a corner. Jesus appeared to many people. So we're not talking about some airy-fairy religious thing. We're talking about something in history that actually happened, seen by many, many people. Within 8 days, we had our Messy Church Plus, Good Friday, and Easter events, including all the prep hours, from which I do want to thank everyone who was involved in all that really, really hard work. Very much worth it. But is Easter an end to itself?
No.
Is it an end to itself?
No.
I want to throw that out there. Or does it set the stage for something even bigger and better? Eric, how could something be bigger and better than the resurrection? Now remember, Jesus died, was buried, and rose again for a purpose. And that purpose was to be able to build a bridge from where we are to where God is, to offer forgiveness for people who would choose, as God calls them, to meet Him and to take His hand, an offer of forgiveness. Just to give you a little bit of a background on this, Jesus, in his first 14 verses of John 21, this is the bit where they were out fishing all night. Steve and his mates. So they went out fishing all night. And what did they catch? If anyone knows what happens. What did they catch? Nada. Nothing. Jesus then shows up. He said, "Hey, up you lot. Chuck out your nets on the right-hand side of the boat." He said, so they obeyed. And lo and behold, they tried to bring up all these fish. And it's so heavy, they could almost not get him up over. And then Jesus said, "Let's come around, have a bit of breakfast together." Right? That just kind of sets up where we're getting ready to look at right now. And the question is, Easter is over, now what? So we've got a number of things we need to cover. And so you're going to have to listen quickly, okay? Are you okay to listen quickly?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. So we're gonna divide this up into 3 chunks. We're going to look at verses 15 through 17 first of all, and we're going to deal with what I'm going to call a should be working. Yeah, curious conversation. Curious conversation. Verse 15 through 17. Let me read that again real quickly. When they had eaten breakfast, like I said, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to them, "Feed my lambs." And he said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Feed my sheep." And he said to him the third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. So we got a bit of a question here. I don't know why this thing is working, but Adam, if you could just help me out. Okay. When Jesus said to them, to Simon, Simon, do you love me more than these? I think a good question is, these what? Okay? What do you think Jesus meant? Or what could he have meant when he said these? What could he have meant? Well, let me throw out a couple options. He could have said, because of Peter, do you love me more than these fish? Or fishing? Okay. Now for me, that would be a tough question. Yeah? I'm not a fisherman, didn't grow up doing it. I tried to take Chase a time or two. He liked it, but it just wasn't my thing. It would be an easy question for me. For Steve, a tough question, yeah? It's an important question. So he could have been talking about the fishing. He could have said, Simon, do you love me more than you love these disciples? Could have meant that. Could have meant that. He could have meant, Simon, do you love me more than these disciples love me? He could have meant that. Could have meant that. I wonder which one that he meant. I personally think Jesus was saying, Simon, do you love me more than these disciples love me? And I'll get to why I think that is the case in just a few minutes. But first we're going to ask the question, what is in a word? What is in a word? Now, in these three verses, there's a lot of interesting things happening. Now, I think I asked this before. How many like language and words? I know Heather popped her hand up. Is there anyone else who kind of likes language and words and things like that? Or, yeah, good. Okay. 3, good. Awesome. Okay. So I need to give you a little bit of this to try and help you to understand what's going on here. But first of all, let me just ask you this. If I said the words, I'm sorry, what does that mean? What does that mean? It could mean more than one thing, right? It could mean, Mick, I've done you wrong and I am sorry. Or if I said, Mick, I'm sorry, it could mean, Chris, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that Christine passed away. Yeah. Now, was it my fault? No. No. I'm sorry that it happened. Mick, I'm sorry that I did something to offend you. Isn't English confusing? Yeah. Severus says, yes, indeed. It's confusing. Or if you have a teenager in your house, it can mean another meaning, right? Sorry! Right? Yep. You've been there? You understand what I'm talking about, right? Were they truly sorry? No. But they were forced to say it, right? One of those kind of things. So English is difficult. And sometimes we have to, when we think about the Bible, actually I was talking to Liana, my Ukrainian friend, and Ukrainian has 2 different words for I'm sorry. One is that, I'm sorry I've done you wrong. Another one, I'm sorry for what happened. So there's no confusion. Isn't that nice? Mm-hmm. However, I found out from Kofi over the last couple of weeks, in Ghana, in his language, they don't have any words for he, her, like that. And that. So they couldn't say, Chris is going to the shop, he's going to the shop. They can't say that. Isn't language weird? It's confusing. It's confusing. So let me give you a couple of bits here as we try to unpack this and try to understand what Jesus is saying or could be saying. Now remember, the Bible says that Jesus is what kind of a shepherd? He is the good shepherd. So Jesus used some shepherding kind of words that are going on here. In those three verses, there's some words that pop up. For example, the word love. The word love. Okay? Does English have any other words that could mean love? Well, we do. We have adore, love.
Dear.
What's that?
Dear.
Dear. Yeah, all kinds of different things. In the language that the Bible is written in, there's other kinds of words like that as well. There's a word that you may have heard this one before, agape. Okay, agape. What does agape mean? Agape means the kind of love that God has for us. It is the self-sacrificing, ultimate, highest level of love. There's another word for love that appears in these verses. It's the word phileo, where we get the town in the state called Philadelphia. Philadelphia, okay? So Phil means love, Delphos means brother. So what it is, it's the city of brotherly love. Isn't that nice? Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. But phileo is not agape love. It is he's my mate. I love him. Okay? I love him. It's a lower kind of love. It's not as intense. It's not that self-sacrificing kind of love that agape is. Now, there's another word there we need to touch on real quick. That is know. Peter said, you know that I love you. There's two kind of knows in these passages. The first kind of know, and you need to say this with me now, is oida. Can you say that with me on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Oida. Oida. Oida means I know it as a fact. I know that, for example, running a marathon is hard work. Okay? Now, someone who's never done it could say, looking at the race, I know that is hard work. However, because they've never done it, can they truly know it? No. Neil, or anyone else who's done it, can say, I know that running a marathon is hard work. Why? Because they have done it. They've experienced it. That's the word gnosko. Can you say that with me? Count 3. 1, 2, 3. Gnosko. Okay. We have oida, which means I know the fact. Gnosko means I know by experience. I know by experience. Okay. Don't get confused. We're going to put all this together. There's no exam at the end, right? No exam, so don't worry. Don't worry. Here we go. Let's try to put this together. Jesus speaking. Simon, do you agape me? First time Jesus asks. Simon, do you agape me? Simon says, Lord, you know, oida, you know the fact that I phileo you. Wow, okay. Well, that's interesting. Jesus says, Simon, do you love me with that intense self-sacrificing love? Peter replied, Lord, you know that I like you intensely. Okay. Second time, Simon, do you agape me? Lord, you know the fact that I phileo you. You are my special friend, that I love you, but agape. The first time he said, Simon, feed my lambs. Okay? The baby lamb. And I don't think Jesus is talking about some physical lamb that's out there. He's talking about what? He's talking about these young believers. Simon, I want you to feed my lambs. Provide spiritual food to all those young believers. The second time, he changes the word. He said, Simon, do you agape me? Lord, you know that I phileo you. Jesus said, Simon, provide the needs of my sheep, which are the grown-up lambs. He changes it a little bit. But then things get really interesting. Simon, third time, Simon, do you phileo me? Now, it is possible that it's just using different words to really mean the same kind of thing. But I wonder, because Jesus said, Simon, do you phileo me? Which is the lower kind of love, the lower one. And then the Bible goes on to say that Peter grieved in his heart because Jesus said, and he changed that word. Peter said, Lord, you know by experience, you know that I phileo you. You know that I love you. Eric, what are you trying to say? What I'm trying to say is this. I think Peter was growing. Wouldn't it be nice that if every person who said yes to Jesus went from there to there in one step? Wouldn't that be nice? Mature believers, like in a blink of an eye. Does it happen that way? No. No. I think Peter was learning, growing, and I don't think he was able to say at that time, Lord, I agape you. I don't think he could say that. Look what happened. It wasn't just a few days ago that Peter said, I'll stay with you, Jesus, right to the end. It wasn't too long when he said what? Well, you are one of those believers. Not me. So he denied Jesus not once, not twice, but 3 times. Peter is growing. Peter is growing. I wonder, isn't it interesting how that Jesus asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? How many times did Peter deny Jesus? 3 times. I wonder. I don't know. I wonder. So what's in a word? A lot is in a word. Then let's come to a bit of a surprise revelation in verse 18 and 19. Verse 18 and 19. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself, you clothed yourself, and walked where you wished. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands. This is odd. You'll stretch out your hands, and another will gird you, will clothe you, and carry you where you do not wish. So that seems like a bunch of double talk. And that seems strange. But then Jesus comes in and tells us what he was on about. Verse 19. This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. Follow me. That first verse is all about Jesus giving Peter a hint on what is going to be happening out there in the future. So I want to ask you this question. Would you want to know? Would you want to know? Jesus saying to Peter, when you were young, you had control over all your own affairs. You were young. You clothe yourself. You go out to work. You go out fishing. You do whatever you want to do. All these kind of things. But Peter, there's coming a time when that's going to change. There's coming a time for you as a disciple that one is going to lead you to a place that you don't want to go to. Now, there's no proof of this, but most historians and certainly church tradition says that Peter died as a martyr, preaching the gospel, and he was crucified. But he was crucified upside down. I have no proof of that. But it's interesting when Jesus said, and the words he said does seem to match that. So literally, for Simon, I'm just wondering in my mind, when he says that his death would glorify God, I'm wondering how in the world could Peter's death glorify God? How can that, how could it work that anyone's death could glorify God? What could that mean? I do think what it means is this, that Peter, staying faithful to God through all the difficult things and times that was coming his way, that the people at the market would be talking about Peter. They'd be saying, you know what? That Peter, I've heard about that bloke. My goodness. And then when those Roman soldiers came and they took him and they crucified him, and he said he didn't want to be crucified in the same manner that Jesus was crucified, that he asked to be crucified upside down. Wow. And that story must have stuck throughout all church history to where we are today. And I'm wondering how many people Peter influenced, even by his death. according to what Jesus said. And Peter, faithful through all of his weaknesses and all of his failings. Doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that just like us? You know what? That to me is one of the things that gives a lot of evidence on that the Bible is true and it's real. It doesn't paint these disciples as some super believers, super Christians, flying around like this from place to place doing it. It doesn't. It shows all their failings, all their weaknesses, all the times that they messed up, just like we do. But the good news is that Jesus is there to lift them up. Jesus is essentially saying to Peter, Peter, you are going to have a cross to bear. And Peter, are you willing to glorify God in the cross that you are going to bear? Now, let's think just for a moment about you and me. The truth is that crosses come in all shapes and sizes, don't they? They do. There's the financial cross. And I mean, we have for all the people that are in this room, maybe the cross that you're having to bear it seems like ongoing financial problems. Now, part of the issue is if we don't manage our money properly, then that's a different kind of thing. But it seems like if we work so hard, and it seems like with inflation and stuff just hits you left, right, and center, here I am. God, I'm your child. I work hard. I serve you. I worship, but it just seems that the financial pressure is always there. That could be your cross that you're having to bear. Could be. Maybe you're having to carry the cross of battles with health. Okay. Bless her. Someday you need to get around Doreen. Let her tell you her foot story. Okay. I tell you what an amazing lady. Amazing lady. And I'm telling you, for those who do not know, Doreen is my ever-ready Energizer bunny person. Remember those commercials? Yes. Yeah. This little bunny, it has little ever-ready batteries in the back. They always went the longest and furthest. Okay, that's Doreen. Nothing stops this lady. Nothing. And she's supposed to be off her feet 10 years ago, but she said, nope, not me. I know the crux of her story was right when she went down to theater for the very first time for her surgeries, she was convinced God was going to heal her. Even when she was on that gurney, God didn't heal her. She just had to carry this cross for those feet for all these years. But I tell you what, she has encouraged me, challenged me, being faithful even through all the difficulties. So I praise God for that. So maybe you're carrying a cross of health issues that seem to plague you. God's not brought healing. He's not giving you relief on that. Maybe it's just like Paul. As Paul prayed 3 times about this thorn. Lots of debate on what this thorn in the flesh is that Paul prayed over. Remember? He said, 3 times I prayed with God. And then God said, my grace is sufficient for you. That's what he said. Maybe that's your cross you're having to bear. Maybe the cross you're bearing is a relationship problems. Maybe it's even within your family. Isn't it wonderful that family is always like heaven on earth, right? No. Maybe it is. Maybe the cross that you're having to bear is the battle of trying to deal with relationships within your family or work so that your example for Christ is still out there. Maybe that's your cross. The reality is we all have a cross that we're bearing. Everyone. I think the question is what he put to Peter is, will you glorify God in the cross that you are bearing? Okay. Now, we can bear our cross in different ways. We can walk around angry all the time. We can do, right? bitter, angry at the world, angry at God, angry with their family, angry at work, angry at all. And I've met some of those folks. They're not very pleasant. But then I've been around people, believers, who have realized that they got a cross to bear. And man, they're saying, I don't know why, but God does. And this is not going to last forever, right? It's not going to last forever. God has my back. Everything's good. Everything's good. So I think the question is not whether we have a cross to bear, but do we glorify God and how we approach that cross? Are we the kind of example to our family? Are we the kind of example at work? Do we do all we can in our finances to try and make sure we're responsible? But maybe God says, Eric, this is your cross to bear. Are you going to glorify me even in this cross of finances? And I think the key to cross bearing is this. The key to cross bearing is this. As Jesus looked to Peter, in verse 19 it says, "And this he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him," if you're there reading with me, he said, "Follow me." Follow me. The key to the cross bearing is follow me. Now, another little language thing for those, now if you don't like the language thing, you can fall asleep for 15 seconds and then come back with us. If you like the language thing, Greek, the original language is nice because you can swap words around depending on what you want to emphasize. That's nice. We can't do that in English. Sign language can do that, by the way, which is nice, but not English. We're pretty strict. The word order is here, you, Peter, me, follow. That's the word order. You, Peter, me, follow. So Jesus even put Peter ahead of himself. And then he put the word. So he was saying, Peter, you. That's going to play up. That's going to play in our next couple minutes. Peter, you follow me. If you're going to bear your cross, if you're going to be successful in this Christian life thing after Easter, then you need to follow me. Christ carried his own cross and he knows its weight. He can truly say, I understand what it means to carry a cross. So the key is doing what? Following Christ. When the world gets your attention so that you see the wind and the waves, if you're familiar with our friend again, Peter, the story of falling underneath the water. When you see the wind and the waves and you go under the water, call and Jesus will pull you up, because the key is what? Following Christ. When you fear for your life because your boat is caught in the storm, follow me, said Jesus. Whether I calm your storm or strengthen you through the storm, you will make it through the storm. Because the key is following Christ. And when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you do not need to fear when you follow Christ, because not only do you follow him, he walks with you through the valley. So the key is what? Following Christ. But then we want to take just a couple minutes now and look at this last little section. We're going to call this, and Doreen will like this, it's Peter being Peter. Peter being Peter. You know what? His personality doesn't change. He's the same kind of bloke, and it shouldn't surprise us. Verse 20. All that's happened. Jesus lays down this big thing of what's going to happen with Peter. He's challenged him to follow me. Remember that. The last words, he says, follow me, Peter. And then verse 20. Then Peter, here we go. You ready? Turning around. Isn't that funny? Saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also leaned on his breast at the supper and said, Lord, who is the one who will betray you? Peter, seeing him, says to Jesus, but Lord, what about this man? Jesus said to him, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me. And then this saying went all around the brethren when this disciple that this disciple would not die. He misunderstood. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but if I will that he remain till I come. What is that to you? So let's try and put this all together now. Peter asked a question. Peter asked a question. And it begins with the very last words of Jesus saying to Peter, Peter, one of these things, right? Peter, you follow me. What's the first thing that Peter does? He turns his head around. What a stubborn bloke. I mean, really. The very last thing Jesus says. And the first thing Peter does is turn his eyes away. And basically he says, speaking about John, the one who leaned against Jesus, the one who asked, who is the one that's going to deny me? Speaking about John, the writer of this book. What about him? Right? Do you remember when you had children? Remember? You said to one, you had a task for them, something around the house to do, and then the other one said, and then they said, well, what about John? What are you going to have him do? Don't worry, you tidy your room. Do you remember that days? Remember that? Yes, indeed. Yes. That's what's going on here. He said, what about this man? What about this one? So what is this all about? What's this all about? I think possibly Peter's being a bit immature. No surprise there. Possibly a bit of jealousy going on there. Possibly. We don't know. But Peter did ask the question, what about this man? What is he meant to do? Is he going to be involved in this hard work? Is he going to be involved in this thing of coming to an end of his life? Having all these things? Is that what's going to happen? But then the disciples misunderstood. They thought Jesus was saying John would not die till Jesus returns. That's not the point. Jesus said, no, that's not it at all. But the point is was Jesus' answer. His point was to Simon, look at me. I want you to follow. It doesn't matter about him. Doesn't matter about them. Doesn't matter about them. You follow me. You follow me. That's where it's at. As a matter of fact, there's another little interesting thing here. No, it's easy for us to say, right, I'll follow for a day or two, and then I'll get off track. But the way Jesus puts it, he says to Peter, he said, Peter, I want you to follow me. And the words he used me is a continuous kind of thing. It means today, and tomorrow, and the next day. Can you guess what? And the next day, and the next week, thank you, Chris, and the next month, forever. Those are Jesus' words to Peter. We are so prone to get off track. You're there. And this is key to the Christian life. And I wish I could tell you that I've been successful with it. The key to the Christian life is in those two simple words. Follow Jesus. End of. Now there's a whole lot in there, but if we'll keep that in mind, then what's after Easter? It's following Jesus day by day by day. And that will lead to what I'm going to call successful Christian life. I want to be great that one day when you arrive to heaven and Jesus would say, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Oh,